Shalom. Today's Daf Yomi is Sukkah Daf Lamed Vav Sukkah 36. Today's Daf Yomi, we're going to discuss the size of an esrog. What is the maximum and minimum size? So we learned in the Mishnah that esrog katan, a small esrog, what's the minimum size? Rameir Omer Ke'egos. Rameir says that the minimum size is like the size of a nut. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says Kebeitz. Rabbi Yehuda says it's the size of an egg. So Amar from Bar Papa, Bar Papa taught Kimachokes Kan, just like there's a dispute in our Mishnah whether it's the size of a nut or the size of an egg. Kach Machokes Bavana Mekur Zalos. So too, there's a dispute with respect to Avana Mekur Zalos. What are these Avana Mekur Zalos? This is a reference to a law with respect to Shabbos, that these are sharp stones, that you're allowed to take these stones into the bathroom to clean yourself with on Shabbos. What do you mean you're allowed to take these stones into the bathroom? They used to use the stones as a type of toilet paper. And so therefore, since they use these stones as toilet paper, even though Rashi writes that even though stones are generally speaking muktzah, you're allowed to take them to the bathroom because the rabbis allow you to move something that's muktzah for the purpose of cleaning yourself because of what's called kavod habrios, to give dignity to the human being. But the biblical prohibition of carrying out from one domain to the other, or rabbinically, even from what's called a karmelis to a reshus hayachid, like a private domain, to a semi-public domain or semi-private domain, that Rashi said would not be allowed. However, Tosfos writes that you're allowed to take out these stones even from a rabbinic domain to another rabbinic domain, which generally be speaking be prohibited, but in this case the rabbis allow, because otherwise it's going to be very embarrassing to not be able to go to the bathroom. So of kavod habrios. But how do we know that there's this dispute by these sharp stones? Tanya b'Shabbos shalosh avana mekur zalos muter lachnis l'beis hakisei. And the Brisa taught that on Shabbos you're allowed to take these three sharp stones into the bathroom. V'kama shivron, and what's their size? Rabbi Meir Omer, that the size is ke'egos, like a nut, and Rabbi Yehuda says kabeitza, the size is like an egg. Just stop for a moment and think about the fact, the irony that the Talmud is talking about two totally diametrically opposed items. One is a stone to like toilet paper, and one is an esrog for the most beautiful fruit, Priyet Sadar, and the Talmud is saying that the measurement is the same. From here we see the concept that our Torah, our beautiful Torah, legislates from the most beautiful to the most mundane of bodily functions, and the Torah gives the same measurement for each of them. But now, what is the larger size? The Mishnah taught to begadol kadesha yochaz shnayim biyad o achas. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that larger size is you need to be able to hold two esrogim in one hand, but if you can't hold two esrogim in one hand, then it's too large and it's not kosher. Whereas Rabbi Yossi says, "Afil echad b'shtei yadav." Even if you could hold one in two hands, that would be sufficient. So the Gemara comes along and the Gemara says that there's a brayso, there's an alternative source to support this teaching. And Tanya Amar Rabbi Yossi tells a story. Ma'isa, there's an incident. I love this story. But Rabbi Akiva Shabbalah Beis HaKnesses, he was coming to the synagogue on Sukkot, ve'esrog al kasefo, and the esrog was on his shoulder. So you see from here that even if you could that it could be as big as holding one in two hands. Rashi points out, why was the esrog on his shoulder? Meirov godlo, because it was so big he couldn't carry it in his hand. He had to put it on his shoulder. Meaning to say, don't say that he put it on his shoulder just to, like, as part of the mitzvah, just like some people have the practice of putting their matzah on their shoulder, but that they do it to show their love of the mitzvah, because that would not have been a proof. So rather, he put it on his shoulder because it was too heavy to gather otherwise. So the commentaries point out that only on his way to the synagogue did he carry on his shoulder. But when he did the mitzvah, for sure he wouldn't have left it on his shoulder, because first of all, that's not called, you need to do natil, you need to take it. You need to take it in a distinguished manner, and putting on your shoulder is not distinguished. And also, you need to hold it in the manner in which it grows, and this is not the manner in which it grows. And the third problem is that you need to hold it with your body directly, and so putting on your shoulder, that's considered a chatzitza, an interposition. So therefore, this was just when on his way to synagogue, but not when he was actually in synagogue. That's how Rabbi Yaakov Emden explains it. And also he writes that according to Rabbi Yossi, it's only going to be kosher if you're able to hold it in your hand during the mitzvah. But if it's so big that he can't hold it, he's not going to fulfill his obligation. That's what Rav Yaakov Emden says. However, the Emek Sukkos writes that from the Ran it implies that you can fulfill your obligation even when you carry it on your shoulder, and even if your garment is an interposition, because the assumption is that you're going to hold it on your shoulder with your hands, and so therefore be sufficient. So that's what Rabbi Akiva did. He put it on his shoulder, and as a result of this, Rabbi Yossi proves that that's hadar. And he says, look, Rabbi Akiva holds like me. So says Rabbi Yehuda, Misham Raya, what are you talking about? That's not a proof. Afhem Amru, they said to Rabbi Akiva, Ein zeh hadar. This is not beautiful. It's not beautiful to have such a big esrog, and so therefore they disqualify. What's the reason why Rabbi Yehuda disqualifies an esrog that's so big because it's not hadar? Because Rabbi Yehuda does not think that this is what hadar means. He's not concerned that this is not hadar. Rather, he's concerned that maybe it's going to fall because it's so big, it's going to fall, and then the esrog will become disqualified. And so therefore, he says, even if you would say it's hadar, it'd be a big problem. If you carry an esrog so big, you might trap it, and that would be problematic.